Hey, we're getting really close to the end of the story of God. We're calling it Echo. This reminder over and over again that God has given us a story, His story, and we want to know about that story. We're getting near the end where we understand the whole significance. We've looked at it one time, we talked about a bow tie where all these stories are pointing to this one point, this point of Jesus being born, of Jesus living, and then Jesus dying. And today, we're at that point of the story of what it looks like to understand of why Jesus came. It's about Jesus' death and resurrection. Well, after the Passover meal, that's where we left off last time, when it was dark, Jesus and his disciples went to an olive garden to pray. Filled with pain and with sorrow, he fell face down on the ground. "Abba, Father!" Jesus cried. Abba really means daddy. Everything is possible for you. If there is another way besides my death, let that happen. I will do whatever you ask. Just as he had finished praying, Jesus looked up, and there was Judas. He was with an armed mob. He greeted Jesus with a kiss, Judas did, to show the guards which one that they should arrest. Jesus said to them, Am I dangerous? Am I a dangerous criminal that you would need weapons to capture me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple where I've been teaching every day? No, this is part of God's plan, just as the prophets predicted long ago. When the guards arrested Jesus, they dragged him away, and the disciples ran and hid. The guards beat Jesus and brought him before the Jewish leaders for questioning him. They asked, Are you the Messiah, Son of God? Jesus answered, I am. And you will see me seated next to God in power, coming back on the clouds from heaven. When Jesus said this, the high priest tore his clothing in horror, and he said, Any man who claims to be God must be put to death. Then they slapped Jesus in the face and they spit on him. Jesus was brought to the Roman governor Pilate. Since Jews could not execute anyone without official approval, the Jewish leaders stirred up the crowd, and they pressed Pilate to have Jesus put to death, and they shouted, Crucify him! Crucify him! Pilate feared a riot would break out, so he handed Jesus over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. Crucifixion was the most cruel and humiliating way to die. Jesus was brutally beaten. He was whipped by the soldiers. They actually put a crown of sharp thorns on his head and a purple robe around his shoulders. Hail the King of the Jews! They laughed. All night the Roman soldiers continued to beat Jesus and mock him. And when morning came, they led Jesus to a place, and it was called Skull Hill. Like a criminal, Jesus was nailed to a heavy wooden cross between two thieves. And hanging there, he cried out, Father, please forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. It's a very powerful scene. At noon, darkness filled the skies, blocking out the sun for 3 hours. Suddenly, the thick curtain hanging in the temple was tore down the middle. And at that moment, Jesus shouted, Father, I give you my life. It is finished. Then Jesus breathed his last breath, and he died. The soldiers broke the legs of the criminals next to Jesus to speed up their deaths. But when they found that Jesus was already dead, they didn't break his legs. But to be sure, one of the soldiers stabbed him in the side with a spear, and blood and water poured out. Later Friday afternoon, Jesus' body was taken down from the cross, wrapped in long strips of cloth, and buried in a rich man's tomb. A large stone was rolled over the entrance to the tomb, and the Roman guards were posted to make sure that nothing happened to his body. Jesus is lying dead in the tomb. Well, early on the third day on Sunday morning, some of the women who followed Jesus went to prepare his body for burial. When they arrived at the tomb, they saw that the stone was rolled away and the soldiers were gone. And suddenly 2 angels appeared and they said, "Why are you surprised? You're looking for Jesus, but he's not here. He's been raised from the dead." And the women were excited but afraid, and they hurried to tell the disciples this amazing news. Some of them ran back to the tomb and looked inside for themselves. Jesus was not there. The story of Jesus' death and his resurrection. Well, there's lots of things happening in this story. So I have a few questions, but I want to go into some of them. Jesus' death and resurrection. Why do you think the curtain in the temple is torn in half? And what did that curtain separate? Now, if you just remember, not too many stories ago, we learned about that. When God set up the tabernacle, and it was the tent of meeting, the traveling tent, and now they had a physical building, a place between the Holy of Holies and where people worshiped, where the priest only went one time a year to get the sins forgiven of all the people. Really, really powerful picture of what's happening there. How did Jesus fulfill the prophet's predictions about the coming Messiah? A lot of people skip over this, and I really want to go through some of these. He was beaten, he was whipped, he was wounded. That's one of the prophecies. He will be put on trial and thrown into prison. His hands and feet would be pierced. He would be killed like a criminal, then buried in a rich man's tomb. God would lay the punishment and guilt for all of our sins on him. His life will be made an offering for us. Because of him, many will be made right with God. So much is happening in this one powerful, powerful act. And of course, how is Jesus being raised from the dead significant? And what does that show us about him? So this story is the crowning point. Again, looking at that picture of all the stories are pointing at this one. I hope that this story encouraged you. I hope that you understand of what this means. I hope that you understand that in the context of this story, you see yourself. You see the hope that is there. Because of Jesus' death, we have life. Because of Jesus' life, we have life to the full. Please look at this. Check out these stories. Follow through. We have one last story to go, and then we're going to know the whole story of God. We'll see you next time.